Wait, pause for a second. Something quiet, something almost invisible has just shifted. If this message speaks to your heart, comment, "I receive this love," like the video, and subscribe for more. It started as a lightness in the air, the way a breath can feel suddenly deeper after you've been holding it too long. You might not have noticed it at first. Just a tiny tug at the corner of your chest when they walked into a room, of a fleeting flicker of something that seemed almost like a smile, but wasn't quite there. You've known each other long enough that the rhythm of your days is almost a shared heartbeat. Yet tonight, while the city hummed its ordinary lullaby, a soft note went missing, and their presence seemed to echo a little further away than usual. Stay with this, because there's a deeper emotional layer here. The distance you both have been feeling isn't the kind that comes from miles or busy schedules. It's a quiet space that grew like ink spreading on paper, slow, inevitable, almost invisible until you glanced down and saw the shade had deepened. Your person, let's call them Alex, has been scrolling through memories on their phone, replaying old messages, watching videos of moments you both thought were just background noise. A laugh caught on a rainy sidewalk, the way your hand lingered a heartbeat longer than necessary when you said goodbye. In those moments, Alex feels a chill that isn't the weather. It's the realization that something that once felt effortless now feels fragile, like a glass ornament that survived a long winter, but shows the first hairline crack when you tilt it. This is where understanding slowly begins. Inside Alex's mind there's a swirl of confusion, a kind of mental fog that refuses to lift. On one side, there's the comfort of the familiar, your shared jokes, the way you both know the exact number of teaspoons to add to coffee without saying a word. On the other side, an unfamiliar ache, a hollow that seems to ask, "Did I miss something?" They keep replaying the night you both sat on the balcony, watching the streetlights flicker like fireflies. You were talking about nothing and everything, and then the conversation fell silent. It wasn't a dramatic silence. No tears, no raised voices, just a guttering of words that should have been easier. A scent suddenly wafts through Alex's memory. The faint aroma of cinnamon from your kitchen when you made those early morning pancakes. It pulls them back to a time when you both would argue over the right amount of syrup, laughing as if the world would never shift. What happens next isn't loud, but it changes everything. These quiet recollections act like tiny mirrors, reflecting pieces of a larger picture you both haven't fully assembled. Alex notices the way your eyes linger a fraction longer on the empty chair across from you, as if waiting for a conversation that never started. There's a subtle trigger that nudges them. A song that used to be our song, now playing on a commuter train. The first few notes cause a pause, a breath held, and then they recall the line you used to sing off-key together. The way you both would argue over who hit the higher note. In that moment, Alex feels a faint sting of regret, not because of a dramatic betrayal, but because they never learned the full weight of that simple, shared melody. It becomes a question that lingers like a pebble in a shoe. Did we let something slip out without catching it? If you've felt this shift too, you already understand. The realization doesn't burst like fireworks. It settles like dust on an old bookshelf, slow, patient, inevitable. Alex begins to see that the small things they thought were insignificant actually carried the weight of unspoken expectations. You might remember the night you both promised to always be honest. A promise spoken over cheap wine, more a feeling than a vow. Alex now wonders if that promise was whispered once, or if it was never truly heard. There's a gentle regret blooming inside, not for a specific hurt, but for the missed opportunity to lean in, to read the subtle cue that was there all along. A hesitation in your tone when you said, "I'm fine," a pause before you laughed at a joke that didn't quite land. They start to piece together the moments when they could have asked, "Are you okay?" Instead, they let the silence stretch, trusting that the space would fill itself. But the space stayed empty, humming a low note that Alex can now recognize as an invitation to notice more deeply. Stay with this, because there's a deeper emotional layer here. Now clarity grows like sunrise over the horizon of their thoughts. The fog begins to thin, revealing a path that looks both familiar and new. Alex sees that the shift in your heart isn't about a single event. It's the accumulation of tiny, unnoticed moments that have quietly moved. There's a soft, almost imperceptible feeling that the timing of everything is aligning, like a subtle tide that knows just when to bring shells ashore. It's not an alarm bell. It's a quiet nudge that whispers, maybe now is the moment to reach out. But reaching out feels like stepping onto an ice-covered pond. Each step careful, fearing the crack that might follow. The thought of picking up the phone, of sending a text, of sharing the exact words that are bubbling under their throat, sits on the edge of their mind unspoken. The emotional shift they feel is not dramatic. It's like a gentle wind that finally moves a stubborn curtain aside, allowing light to stream in where there was only shade. They recognize the pattern, the small ways you both have been holding back, perhaps out of respect for each other's space, perhaps out of fear of breaking something fragile. If this resonates, let it settle in you. There's a feeling of timing that feels almost inevitable, though not in a grand cosmic way. More like the quiet certainty that a favorite song will play at just the right moment in a cafe, reminding you of a conversation you thought you'd left behind. Alex wonders if this is what you both have been waiting for, a subtle invitation to look inward, to see the places where love lingered, unspoken, waiting for a gentle hand to acknowledge it. It's not an argument, not an accusation, but a soft recognition that perhaps both of you have been dancing around a quiet truth. The truth isn't dazzling. It sits on a kitchen table, next to the unpaid bills and the half-finished knitting project. It's the fact that you both miss each other's presence in a way that isn't just about physical proximity, but about the shared rhythm of your lives that has gone slightly offbeat. A growing clarity settles in Alex's chest. They see the space where your person's laughter used to echo, and they feel a gentle tug to fill it. Not with grand gestures, but with the simple act of listening for the faintest sound of the heart you both once shared. What happens next isn't loud, but it matters more than you think. In the quiet of the night, while the world outside hums on, Alex finds themselves picturing the moment when they finally raise their voice, soft, tentative, yet honest. They imagine the relief that might follow, a small exhale shared between two people who have learned that silence can be both a shield and a barrier. The thought of the conversation itself feels like a door that's cracked open just enough for air to whisper through. The question hangs, not as a demand, but as an invitation. Do you still hear me, even when I'm not speaking out loud? If you've ever stood in the same place, watching the other person's world shift while yours remains still, you know the weight of those unspoken words. It's a weight that feels like a stone you choose to set down, not because you're giving up, but because you're making room for something else to sit. That quiet, steady presence of mutual understanding. And so, with a soft heart and a cautious hope, Alex realized that the moment to bridge the gap might be less about timing and more about the willingness to lean into the quiet spaces and let the gentle truth of their connection linger. And what they are beginning to realize now is something they can't ignore anymore. Alex's thumb hovered over the screen, the glow of the phone lighting the small crease of worry that had formed between their brows. It wasn't the first time they'd stared at a blank chat window. But tonight the air felt thicker, as if the space between the two of you had been filled with a soft, unfinished sentence. There was a faint hum of traffic outside the apartment, the low-key rhythm of a city that never quite stopped. Inside, a candle they'd lit weeks ago for no special reason still flickered, its flame casting gentle shadows on the wall. Shadows that seemed to move in sync with Alex's thoughts. Hold that thought, there's another quiet layer waiting. A memory nudged itself forward, uninvited but familiar. The morning they'd found a handwritten note tucked under the coffee mug. "You're my favorite sunrise." The paper was a tiny rectangle of ordinary stationery, yet the words had settled like a pebble in a still pond. Alex could almost hear the soft rustle of the note as they read it, feel the warmth of the mug against their hands, and taste the bittersweet coffee that followed. Back then, they hadn't thought much of it. It was routine, a habit, something that seemed to happen without any grand intention. Today, it perched on the edge of Alex's awareness, a reminder that love often hides in the mundane. The realization arrived gently, like a feather landing on an open book. The affection had been there, spoken in silence more often than in shouted declarations. Keep listening. The next moment holds a subtle truth. The inner confusion that had been a low-key buzz all week began to resolve itself into a clearer shape. Alex caught themselves asking, did I ever really listen to the way they showed they cared? The question was not rhetorical. It was a soft probe into a part of their heart that had been quiet for too long. They remembered the evening when the rain had tapped against the windows, and they'd both laughed while trying to keep the kitchen floor dry. Their person had slipped on a soggy towel, grinned and said, I'm practically a mermaid now. That joke, light as it was, had been a tiny affirmation that they were together, even when the world got slippery. Now that joke resurfaced, and with it, a tender acknowledgement. Perhaps the love they were missing wasn't a missing phrase, but a missing feeling of safety that had been built on those small acts. Notice the pause. It's where the real change is happening. Regret came not as a storm, but as a quiet sigh. A subtle acknowledgement that they had let those quiet demonstrations pass without gratitude. They thought, if I had said thank you, maybe it would have felt different. Not because of blame, but because there was a gentle yearning to honor the intention behind that handwritten note, that rain-splattered joke, that cup of coffee left on a rough morning. Growing clarity twined around that regret like a vine, slowly unfolding. The walls Alex had erected, built from past misunderstandings and the fear of vulnerability, now appeared more like a fence that could be opened with a simple push. A new perspective began to emerge. Maybe reaching out wasn't about fixing something broken, but about acknowledging a shared rhythm that had continued quietly all this time. If this feels familiar, lean into it. Their finger hovered again over the text field. The first draft read, Hey, I've been thinking about that note you left. I missed it. It felt too formal, too distant. Alex deleted it, then typed, You know that morning coffee? I wish I'd thanked you properly. The sentence felt warmer, but still incomplete. A soft chuckle escaped them, remembering how their person would always grin at Alex's half-hearted jokes. Remember when I called you a master of burnt toast? That was my way of saying I love the way you try, even when it doesn't come out perfect. The memory was a small ember, suddenly glowing brighter. It reminded Alex that love isn't measured by flawless moments, but by the willingness to be present even in burnt toast. What follows might be soft, but it's a turning point. The thought of actually pressing send lingered like the moment before a tide rolls in. There's anticipation, a tiny tremor of nerves, but also an undercurrent of certainty. Alex imagined the notification ping on the other side, a small vibration that would say, I'm here, I see you. That imagined ping was enough to soften the fear, turning it into something more like curiosity. In the background, the city's lights flickered, a rhythm that felt oddly synchronized with their heartbeat. It was as if the world, in its own indifferent way, had aligned a little pause for this exchange. The feeling wasn't grand destiny, it was simply the quiet tilt of a moment that allowed one person to open a door they had kept shut. Hold on to this. The next piece subtly shifts, yet the hesitation lingered. Alex thought about the possible responses. A simple thanks, a warm acknowledgement, or maybe silence. They imagined the silence, not as abandonment but as space, an opportunity to let the words settle, to give each other room to breathe. In that vision, they saw their person holding their phone, a soft smile forming as they read the message, perhaps recalling the same note and the coffee. The unspoken love they both carried, those quiet affirmations, the unsaid appreciation, began to feel less like a burden and more like a shared secret. It was a secret that could finally be spoken, not out of obligation, but out of gentle invitation. Remember that feeling. It will surface again soon. A subtle shift in perspective deepened. Instead of wondering whether they were overstepping, Alex sensed that maybe the other side had been waiting for this very nudge. The thought that maybe they're feeling the same softened the edge of doubt. It felt like two separate melodies, slowly finding a common chord, each note familiar yet newly resonant. The phone screen reflected Alex's face, a blend of nerves, hope, and a calm that seemed to come from accepting that the moment, however small, mattered. They typed a final line, simple and honest. "I've been missing these little things we share. Just wanted you to know." The words felt like a quiet bridge. No grandiose statements, just a gentle acknowledgement of the daily tenderness they both had been living. What happens next isn't loud, but it matters more than you think. The cursor blinked, a tiny heartbeat on the screen. Alex's hand trembled just enough to make the finger hover, then slide down to the send button. In that instant, a flood of feelings rushed through. The lingering regret of unspoken gratitude, the growing clarity that these moments mattered, the gentle hope that the other side would receive the message with the same softness they had intended. And right then, as the phone vibrated lightly in their palm, a soft breeze slipped through the cracked window, carrying with it the scent of rain-damp earth and distant street food, familiar aromas that had once been part of their shared evenings. It reminded Alex of the time their person had tasted a slice of mango on the balcony and exclaimed, "You always find the sweetest things." That memory, like a tiny lantern, lit up the space between them, making the gap feel a little less wide. And as they hover over the send button, a new thought surfaces that could change everything.